We get a huge report from an NHL insider that the Carolina Hurricanes are actively trying to fix their goalie problem by calling multiple teams to address the issue. We're going to break all this down and more later on in this episode. Before we start, I just want to say that 90% of you guys watching this video are not subscribed. So if you're enjoying this daily NHL content and you want to stay up to date on everything to do around the league, make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button. We'll be here all season giving you updates from around the league. But with that, Darius, let's just hop straight into the big topic today, which is the fact that the Carolina Hurricanes have been actively trying to find goaltending help. We can see this was paraphrased from Elliotte Friedman. They were serious about acquiring Mackenzie Blackwood before he was traded, and John Gibson has either been very close to joining the Hurricanes or never. So let's just hop straight into the biggest name on this, which is John Gibson. And what's your thoughts on the Hurricanes being actively shoppers for a goaltender?
Now, I think Hurricanes fans can agree that, Kochetkov in net is still a pretty good option, but is he a starter in this league, right? He's shown flashes. He has shown flashes. But if this team wants to get to where they want to go, which is a Stanley Cup, because they've been really good for, the last almost 10 years to this point, right? Very consistent seasons. And again, this year, putting together a very good season, tops in the league. Again, going to make the playoffs in the Metro, right? That's all fine and good. But they might need a piece or two to put them over the top. And that could be a bona fide starting goaltender. And like you alluded to, John Gibson is exactly that. I mean, for years, this guy has been one of the best goalies in the league, stuck on one of the worst teams in the league. And, when he first came into the league, yes, Anaheim was a pretty good team. But for the last, I guess, 10 years or so, or since that core kind of retired and moved on from the team, it has been tough for John Gibson in Anaheim. And I've, myself, you, Mark, everyone's heard rumors of John Gibson going everywhere at this point. Could be Toronto, it could be anywhere, right? We even heard Boston at one point years ago. But, to this point now, the Carolina Hurricanes could use a starting goaltender, obviously, with Freddie Andersen out. So I think it's a very interesting option. I think that Anaheim is looking at moving a couple pieces. This deadline could be Jacob Trouba as well, could be John Gibson. So I think that they're ready to make some moves from, some of the older guys on their team for some assets. And I think Carolina has a couple assets, and this could be a team that's one or two pieces away from finally doing what they've set out to do the last couple of years.
And I mean, looking at Anaheim, I think the biggest reason why they weren't shipping out John Gibson, because they never really had a goaltender to take the starting reins. But now with Lucas Astol playing stellar on this Anaheim team, I do think John Gibson and his $6.4 million cap hit may be heading out. Now, looking at this, you do have this year and 2 more years after of John Gibson. He's 6.4 million. He will be 33 at the end of this year, at the end of the deal, sorry. But looking at Gibson as a goaltender, he is a workhorse. We've seen him start so many games with the Anaheim Ducks season after season while putting up good numbers for even a bad Anaheim Ducks team. We've seen him in his prime. We've seen what he looked like on a good Ducks team. This was a guy that was kept, and they traded Freddie Andersen because they trusted him so much. So we could see Carolina really go out and help solidify their goaltending by picking up John Gibson. Now, looking at the numbers of the goaltending right now with the Carolina Hurricanes, you have Cooch being their starting goaltender, going 12-4-0. You can work your way down. Spencer Martin, Freddie Andersen, and now they have Dustin Tokarski on the team as well. Looking at the cap hit, you have Cooch locked up on a 3 years, $2 million per year. Fitting John Gibson would work on this team. But Darius, looking at this, do you think Freddie Andersen might be going the other way if they were trying to acquire John Gibson?
It could work, especially with the salary this year, right? Because if we look towards the next couple of years, I think the Hurricanes can absolutely make it work in terms of salary, and we can get to that breakdown in a minute, but they can definitely make it work going forward. It's just this year, right? So they have to have some salary going out. Anaheim is really not going anywhere. So maybe they want, if we're going to give you one of our better goaltenders, and who has been a pretty good goaltender the last couple of years because we found our new starter in Dahlstall over there in Anaheim, then, if we're taking salary back, we want a couple more assets. But again, I think that the Carolina Hurricanes might be open to doing something like that because this is a player and a goaltender that can put them over the top. And right now, Cooch, yes, he is good, right? I think that he can be a starter in the league, but he hasn't really proven that yet. Same with Freddie Andersen, too. There's times in the playoffs where Freddie Andersen is just not that guy. And if you look at the depth chart, like you're seeing on screen right now, we did a video a couple weeks ago where we were talking about this exact situation because Andersen is going to be out long term. And then Spencer Martin came in and got a shutout and probably made me look bad on my analysis there. But I don't think that that's an option long term. Spencer Martin came in, it was a good story, but I don't think that's an option long term. And Tokarski has been, around for a very long time. That's not an option long term. So you have one goaltender right now, and I think that if you really want to solidify that spot and go for a Stanley Cup and make some noise in the playoffs again, because again, this is a very steady team. Rod Brindamore has this team playing fantastic hockey the last number of seasons. Maybe it's time to go get a starter in John Gibson. But again, from the Anaheim point of things, I do think that they would be open to taking a guy like Freddie Andersen back, or at least his salary, if there were a couple sweeteners in the deal.
Yeah, because looking at this team, like you said, Rob Brindamore has got the best out of this team. Yes, Kotkaniemi has not been the best second line center, and a lot of fans want this addressed as well as that pure second line center to work with this team. But looking at every aspect of this team, minus the goaltending, like I said, Kuch is awesome. Tokarski might not be the answer as a backup goaltender, but looking at every other position on this Carolina team, they look stacked. You look at the forwards, they're all well-rounded. You look at the defense, and this is probably the deepest defense in the NHL, having offensive power from a guy like Ghost on the back end as well. But the biggest thing they need to do is, of course, address the goaltending. Yes, the $6.4 million might cost a lot, and if you want that retained, it's going to cost even more. But looking at the defense going for the next couple of seasons, you are saving a bunch of money with Orlov off the books next year, Brent Burns off the books. So you have the money to acquire the $6.4 million going into the next 2 seasons. But Darius, looking at this defense, who they have locked up, do you think they could afford to take a couple pay cuts and get rid of a guy like Orlov and Burns in the offseason if this means John Gibson for 3 years?
I think that this is a team that would want to look to do that, right? When you look at Brett Burns, for example, he's much older now. And when he first came to the Hurricanes, it was a good option for them, but he's older now. I don't know if re-signing him is an option for this team. I think you want to look at retooling and getting a little bit younger. And same with Orlov. I mean, that's quite a bit of money for Dmitry Orlov at this point. And again, his next contract may not look like that, but maybe that's a guy you move off of. Maybe you look at some of the other options in the organization, some younger options, or again, free agency. You try to retool on the fly a little bit next year. But if you were to make some of those moves, like dropping those 2 players, not re-signing them, maybe you go a little bit younger, and then you can afford the goaltender in John Gibson, right? And John Gibson, again, only 31 right now, right? He's still in his prime. We see a lot of goaltenders get better as they get older. So, I have no doubt in my mind that John Gibson is a starter in this league. He is a great goaltender. He's just stuck on a pretty bad team. And I wonder what he would look like on a great team like the Carolina Hurricanes, who play with a lot of structure, right? I think that could be really good for the Hurricanes. So it's definitely an option for them. They can make it work in terms of salary. So I wonder if they take a deep dive into that, because again, according to Elliotte Friedman, they are interested in getting a goaltender. That's something they're actively looking at right now. And like I said, there may be another piece or 2 away from really making a big splash in the playoffs. But I think one of those pieces probably has to be a goaltender at this point. You really don't know what's going to happen with Freddie Andersen. I love the guy, and I hope that, he figures it out, and his health issues, all that, he gets back to playing full time. But that's a tough situation right now where you have to think about it logically as well, right?
And I mean, looking at this, even if they do not trade out a guy like Freddie Andersen in this trade, you could keep 3 goaltenders going into the playoffs, because anything can really happen. An injury can happen at any point. It's better to be safe than sorry. But just looking at the fact that they were looking at Mackenzie Blackwood, you can pause and you can look at the return that the Sharks got for him. I do think it's going to cost a tiny bit more to get John Gibson. It's going to cost even more than that if you're looking at retaining salaries. But overall, Canes fans, what's your thoughts on the goalie situation? Are you fine with Kuch going out and being your number 1, hopefully getting Freddie Andersen back at some point in the new year to run the backup or take the starting role? Or do you rather them to go out, pick up a guy like John Gibson, the workhorse that can play almost every game for you, and see if that fixes the problems? But with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure to go down and leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode, but I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care.